Welcome. Scott here. Here is a quick boss guide for the upcoming raid event, Dauntless Defender Z raid. The synergy units for the event are Tidus, Barret, Queen and Kam'lanaut. The featured units will be getting their force enhancement boards unlocked. Tidus FR will be making its debut. Barret will be getting his C90 awakening. Both Tidus and Barret will be getting their reworks. We will be fighting two Defender Z. They have 60 million HP each. The turn requirement is 70. The HP requirements is 10,000. Before I continue further, here is a small disclaimer clause for the video. The guide is written based on the time that the event was released for the Japanese version. Please do note that it is possible that the boss fight mechanics might differ when the actual event is released in global. As we are no longer have Lufania Plus fights, the boss guide will be focused primarily on Shinryu fights. In Shinryu, you need to understand the effects gained by the boss as the force gauge build up, its force ability and its force time effect. As your party has low force levels at the start of the era, it is highly certain that the boss force gauge will build up faster than yours. To have a better understanding on the basics of the force gauge mechanics and Shinryu fights, I have done a video explaining the mechanics. I have included the link to the video under the comments and video description for your quick reference. For this fight, the boss force gauge is broken into 5 thresholds. When the boss gauge is more or equal to 20%, the boss gains turn deletion immunity where you will see its subsequent turns being framed. When the boss gauge is more or equal to 40%, the boss gains turn deletion immunity and all parties' turn rate will be lowered by 10%. When the boss gauge is more or equal to 60%, the boss gains turn deletion immunity and all parties' turn rate will be lowered by 30%. When the boss gauge is more or equal to 80%, the boss gains turn deletion immunity and all parties' turn rate will be lowered by 50%. The boss force gauge will build up faster as its HP is lowered. You can refer to the table on the screen for the percentages. At the first glance, turn deletion immunity or turn rate down aura doesn't seem dangerous. But the auras can cause a lot of things. It will prevent you from pushing the boss turns too far with turn deletion, and the boss turns will become more frequent due to your party's turn rate being lowered. At the 100% threshold, the boss will use its force ability, Heavy Clap Plus Plus, and activates its force time for 5 turns. The boss force ability, Heavy Clap Plus Plus, is a guaranteed hit, reset break status, AoE Brave plus HP attack. It will grant 5 non-framed buffs for 5 turns. Amongst the buffs, they include 100% HP damage up and 100% Brave damage up. It is your best interest to dispel, overwrite with their debuffs or block them with framed debuffs. Upon using the force ability, the boss will enter into its force time where the gauge will start to emit a red hue with counter of 5 on its gauge. When the force time is activated, the boss gain a 3% HP regen which amounts to 1.8 million HP per turn. It will also apply a field effect where your party turns gets delayed by 1 turn after the unit acts. To freeze the enemy's force time, you need to use a ranged force ability which is Tidus's FR ability or Kane's FR ability at the moment. Now let's proceed with some party setup recommendations. Recommended calls abilities. To ensure that you are able to constantly break them, it is important to inflict defense down debuffs. Example of calls abilities that inflict defense down calls are Ferris, Tidus, Jack, and Vanille. To speed up the fight, using HP damage up debuff calls like Karasame, Seymour, Fran, Ignis, Lily-Set, Maria, and Dark Knight Cecil are useful. Although a bit trickier to use, aura-type HP damage up calls like Kumari, Alisai, Priyash, Leo and Locke are also viable. Most recently C90 units have aura-type HP damage up bonuses. You can use Dissidia DB Call Finder to find out more. The boss will buff itself with 5 buffs when force time is activated. You can use units that provide AoE dispel like Pain, Ferris, Beatrix, or Bald here. You can't push their turn back with turn deletion, but you can make of delay utility with units like Cypher or Quistis. Next, I will be covering units that will be useful to handle the fight mechanics. For any endgame fights like Lufania and Shinryu, it is always recommended to bring supports for their aura and buffs. You can consider bringing Selpha, Lena, Ishtala, Yuna, Garnet, Purim, Rem, and Ramza. Selpha can make your party hit hard with her guaranteed launch debuff, while Lena can ensure your party is always safe with her powerful HP regen buffs. The boss doesn't have a lot of HP attacks, but they can be very dangerous with their hard-hitting attacks. It is advisable to bring a damage mitigator if you doing a hit and counter run. You can consider Leela, Beatrix, Snow, Zack, Edge, Warrior of Light, Orin, and Golov. Evasion tanks like Leela, Golov, or Edge are great here. You can also consider to bring these units for the fight if you have them. Let's cover the other synergy unit. Barret is useful for his guaranteed critical hit buff aura. He also gets a nice upgrade with his C90 awakenings. Edgar is great for his weapon type Imperil, and he hits for weakness damage against machinery enemies. If you bringing Tidus or a turn spammer, units that does follow up are valuable for them. Freya, Cisnei, Noctis, Cloud of Darkness and Kain are some examples. The boss can buff themselves with a lot of buffs at the force time. You can make use of Vincent's BT aura to negate them, or a buff stealer like Bald here to steal. Laguna BT trap buffs work well with Kain FR or Tidus FR for off-turn damage as well. Both Vincent and Laguna offer nice debuffs to weaken the bosses. If you don't have Tidus, you can bring Tira as your designated turn spammer. With this event, we are in the second cycle into the FR era. Optimal FR to use for this fight are Tidus, Kain, Desch and Kam'lanaut. Tidus and Kain are optimal ranged FR and helps a lot in whipping out tons of damage in an instant. Tidus work pretty well with Kain. Kam'lanaut FR can help to boost a burst phase damage immensely if you have fulfilled his FR conditions. Desch FR could well here as a countermeasure due to delay effect of the party turns. However, you will need to pair him with turn disabler like Kam'lanaut, Kryl, Fang to make his FR better. As Shinryu is about building up your force gauge chargers units are great to deploy here. Characteristics of Force Charger are the unit have substantial amount of instant turn non-attacking abilities. At max force enhancement level 30, one such instant turn ability can supercharge the force gauge by a whopping 50%. You can easily amplify your force time damage by abusing the supercharging mechanics. Examples of such force gauge chargers units are Kryl, Braska, Pernello and Ignis. For other recommendations, you can consider the following. For tanks, you can bring Warrior of Light, Orin, Cater or Prompto. Damage dealers like Kain, Strago, Machina, and Jet are useful here as well. Like Tidus, Machina can do boss no turns for this fight when you paired him with powerful aura support. If you are doing the hit and counter game, constant brave refunding and powerful defense boost are important. Rosa and Paladin Cecil offer powerful aura for the party. Kamari has brave damage reduction on his Mighty Guard ability and can blind the boss attacks with his Nova. Kais can ensure you launch the boss all day. His hero support also offer break immunity. This will help a lot to reduce the brave damage received as well. On the screen, you will see a timeline showing the HP thresholds triggers that you need to watch out for. Like Lufania, Shinryu fights also features aura boosts for the boss when their HP are depleted to a certain threshold. The stats boosts are triggered at the start of the fight and 79%. Like other Shinryu fights, the enemy's force gauge will charge faster as their HP depletes. As the enemy's force gauge reaches 20% and above, the boss will start to frame their turns and gains immunity to turn deletion. As the gauge charges up, the boss will gain aura that reduce your party turn rate, which will indirectly result you seeing the boss turns more frequent. The boss force ability Heavy Clap ++ is a guaranteed hit, AoE Brave plus HP, and grants the boss 5 non-framed buffs for 5 turns. The buffs gained by the boss is very potent. If the buffs are still active during the boss force time, the boss will be tough to handle. so it is your best interest to dispel their buffs, overwrite with debuffs or block the buff slots with framed buffs. When it activates its force time, the boss will gain a 3% HP regen or 1.8 million HP per turn. Any turn that your character taken will result in your character's next turn get delayed. The boss has a standard attack rotation. It is worth noting that after it uses Heavy Clap Plus, it will gain a 100k shield. If you don't break the shield, it will use Flame Hurricane Plus, which is a single target, guaranteed hit, Brave plus HP attack. Overall, this fight isn't that difficult as long as you have units that can handle the mechanics. Evasion tanks like Leela, Glove, Edge, or 8 will have a nice field day in this battle. If you have Kam'lanaut or Tidus, you can easily do boss no turns thanks to their powerful FR mechanics. Make sure you do something on the boss Brave when the boss force time are about to trigger. Setzer and Cater LDCA calls are great for handling this. Now let's proceed with the boss mechanics proper. Similar to any Lufania fights, for Shinryu fights, the boss will also gain stats boosts and Brave gain reduction auras when you deplete the boss's HP to a certain threshold. However, Shinryu bosses will also gain HP damage reduction auras as well. The threshold's trigger for this fight is at the start of the fight and 79% HP threshold. At the start of the fight, it will boost its defense stats by 200%. It will raise its Brave damage and Brave gain reduction auras to 80%. It will also reduce your HP damage dealt by 50%. At 49% HP threshold, it will further boost its defense stats to 300% and the HP damage dealt reduction auras to 80%. To handle the defense stats boost, you can inflict defense down calls. To handle the Brave gain reductions, you can bring a Brave gain up support like Agrias, Ram, or Quistis. With the recent units released, you shouldn't have any problem in handling the Brave gain or damage reduction auras. For HP damage reduction auras, HP damage up calls will only partly offset against the reductions. However, you can easily overwrite them with your party force time. As we progress through the era, we will gain access to units with FR that allows you to build up your force time HP damage bonuses up to 999%. Learning on how to take full advantage of the damage window in Shinryu fight holds the key on how to make Shinryu fights easier. Now, I will be covering the boss key mechanics in detail. As mentioned earlier, the boss has a standard attack rotation cycle. It will start off with Heavy Clap Plus, which is an AoE Brave attack. After the attack ended, it will gain 80% defense up buff for 3 turns along with a 100k Brave shield. If the shield gain is broken, it will use Flame Hurricane, a single target Brave on its following turn. However, if the shield is still active, it will use Flame Hurricane Plus instead, which is a single target, guaranteed hit, Brave plus HP attack. It can be very deadly if it breaks the target. On the following turn, the boss will use Blast Punch, which will reduce its target Brave by 50% of the target's current Brave. Lastly, the boss will use Double Attack, a single target Brave before it will revert back the Thunder Clap Plus. I have come to the last slide of the guide. By now, you should have at least one of the 6 FR. Generally, you just charge up your force gauge. Have the FR unit activate their force time with their force ability. Prepare for a big damage phase either through a unit burst phase or supercharge the gauge with Kane's follow-up. To build up the bonuses efficiently, you need bring a force gauge charger. Examples are Pernello, Kryle, Ignis or Braska. At force level 30, this units can boost the force charge with 50% with their instant turn, non-attacking ability on top of the force time conditions. If you bring Kane or using Kane BT friend as support, have him activate his BT aura and let him stay in the air firing the lancets while your force gauge charger is spamming his or her instant turns. If you have Kam'lanaut fully built with FR and BT, you can abuse his powerful FR mechanics by fulfilling 3 of the following conditions. 1. Constant launches. Selfie LD debuff, Kai's Hero Support or Sid Rain's LDCA on your burst unit. 2. Ice Enchant. You can use Karasame LDCA for party Ice Enchant or bring an Ice Enchanter like Celis, Onion Knight, or Karasame himself. Snow also offers party-wide Ice Enchant with his BT Aura. 3. Make sure you inflict a turn disable debuff on the boss. Kam'lanaut BT is the easiest to set up. You can go through a setup process for this as well. When all conditions are met, the party can meet 80% HP damage bonus with a full party launch. Now let's recap on the boss key mechanics. The boss hits pretty hard. So in order to avoid broken too frequently, bring tanks, brave damage mitigators or evasion units. When the boss force time is up, they will use Heavy Clap ++ where they will gain 5 buffs where 2 of the buffs will double the boss HP and brave damage potency. This can be very dangerous if you left it unattended. To handle the boss during force time, you can consider to use one of the following options. 1. Block their buff slots with framed debuffs or overwrite their buffs with debuffs. Tidus can inflict 3 debuff slots, so you just need find 5 more debuffs to block out the rest. Other than preventing the boss from buffing themselves too much, attack down debuffs like Vincent can make their damage output hit your party like insect bites. 2. You can dispel their buffs with a dispeller or using Vincent BT Aura or buff negation unit like Aerith or Yuffie to prevent the boss from gaining buffs. 3. The last method is disabling their turns with turn disable debuffs like paralysis or confusion. Both Desch and Kam'lanaut offer great turn disable utility. As the boss gains turn deletion immunity as their force gauge build, avoid bring turn deletion units. If you want to push back their turns, you can make use of delays and rebreaks. Now I will make a quick overview on the FR of the featured unit, Tidus. Tidus is a very good FR unit and a beginner-friendly FR. You just need to understand on how to play Tidus well. Generally, you just need to slap debuffs on the bosses and have Tidus spam his instant turn and nuke the boss. Tidus gets a lot of significant upgrades with his rework. Even without his FR, he is still one of the best damage dealers currently in the game. He offers a decent source of rebreaks with his BT buff up. To uptick his FR, you need to use an instant ability. His FR, S1+, LD and AA are all instant abilities. As long as you upkeep his winning spirit buff, he can hog turns like no tomorrow. You can extend his buffs with his AA and LD. With his FR, the optimum BT rotation is using his LD, spam quick hit for 3 turns, FR, EX and lastly uses his BT finisher. You can also use his FR to trigger supercharging. For example, a max force level Pernello can easily generate a 80% supercharge with her instant abilities with 30% from Tidus FR condition and 50% from Pernello's force enhancement bonuses. Once the gauge is high, you can initiate a nuke attack to deal a huge big burst damage. With this, I have come to the end of my boss guide presentation. Hopefully you find it useful. If you like the video, please give a like. Please subscribe to my channel for future gaming content. Good luck for the fight tomorrow. Bye.